Bom dia a todos. Vamos
Good morning,
iniciar a
everyone.
videoconferência
Let's
da
begin the
Lojas
Lojas Renner S.A. video
Primeiramente, para quem não me
conference.
conhece, sou
First of
Fabiana
all, for
Oliver.
those who don't know me, my
Juntei
name
ao
is
time
Fabiana
da
Oliver.
Renner há 3
I joined
semanas
the
como
Renner
diretora de
team
RI.
3 weeks ago
Presentes
as
aqui
Investor
comigo
Relations
Fábio Faccio,
Officer. With
CEO,
me today are
e
Fabio
Daniel Santos,
Faccio, our
CFO.
CEO, and Daniel Santos, our
Antes de passar a
CFO.
palavra para eles,
Before
gostaria
giving
de
them the
fazer
floor,
alguns
I'd like to make
avisos.
some announcements.
Esta videoconferência
This
está sendo
video conference call is
gravada
being
e
recorded
traduzida
and
simultaneamente
translated
para o inglês.
simultaneously into
A
English.
apresentação será
We will
projetada em
show here
português.
the
E
presentation
para
in
quem nos
Portuguese.
acompanha em inglês,
So for
ela foi
those following the call
disponibilizada
in
aqui no
English,
chat
the English
e no
version
site de
can be
RI.
downloaded from the
Perguntas de
chat and from
jornalistas
our
devem ser
IR website.
direcionadas à
Questions
nossa
from
assessoria de
journalists can be
imprensa
directed
no
to our press
telefone
office
11
through the number 11
3165
3165
9586.
9586.
Antes de continuar,
Before proceeding,
esclareço que eventuais
let me
declarações
advise you that
relativas às
forward-looking
perspectivas de
statements
negócio,
relative to the company's
projeções
business
e metas
perspectives,
operacionais e
projections,
financeiras
and
são
operating and
crenças e
financial
premissas
goals
com
are
base em
based on
informações
beliefs and
atualmente
assumptions
disponíveis
and
e
on
não são
information
garantia
currently
de
available.
desempenho.
They are not a guarantee
Dependem
of
de
performance,
circunstâncias
as
que
they
podem
depend
ou
on
não ocorrer.
circumstances that may or
No
may not
Q&A,
occur.
as perguntas
During the
poderão ser
Q&A,
realizadas por áudio.
questions may be asked
Com
live.
isso,
With
passo a
that,
palavra ao Fábio.
I now turn the floor to Fabio.
Bom dia, bem-vinda, Fabi.
Good morning. Welcome, Fabi, and thank you all for joining us today. We will share now our results for the third quarter of 2025, the development of our trajectory, and our outlook for the future. The initiatives we implemented between 2022 and 2023 to evolve our fashion execution model, fulfillment, and omni experience have been contributing to our results since 2024. The benefits captured also reflected in the higher net income, which increased from approximately 900 million the last 12 months in September 2023. Well, it increased to 1.4 billion this year, a 49% increase, while earnings per share grew 59%. In the same period, compound retail sales was 9.6%, with a 2.2 percentage point increase in gross margin. Realize went from a negative result of 100 million at the time to a positive 390 million. Our EBITDA margin rose 7.9 percentage points and ROIC rose 4.6 percentage points. The specific performance of Q3 did not alter this trajectory. It mainly reflected the distinct climate dynamics compared to 2024. We had a normal autumn in 2025, which favored the sale of winter items in Q2, but on the other hand, limited their availability at the beginning of Q3. Back then, we decided not to increase the volume of orders for winter items based on our risk-return assessment at the time, considering possible excess inventory. However, temperatures remained cooler in Q3, which, combined with our significant exposure to the south and southeast easterns and a cooler start of the spring, resulted in a loss of sales opportunities that we estimate between 2 to 3 percentage points. Retail sales in the period grew 4.2%, with apparel growing 4.7%. Given the opposite seasonal dynamics between Q2 and Q3 compared to the previous year, on average, for these two quarters, we grew 11.5% in retail and 12.5% in apparel, maintaining the pace of growth of the year, even with this loss of opportunity. In the first 9 months, we grew 11.6% in retail and 12.8% in apparel, with a gain in market share. In warm regions, growth in Q3 was well above average. The same happens when we look at the performance of non-seasonal items, which are independent on climate. They also stood out, and this shows how well our collections have been received. Retail gross margin continued its upward trajectory, reaching 55.1%, 56.2% in apparel, up 0.4 and 0.5 percentage points, respectively.
Esse avanço também
This
reflete as
progress
melhorias
also reflects improvements in fashion execution and more accurate fulfillment.
nesse trimestre.
In this
Em função
quarter,
do calendário de algumas despesas
Q3,
previstas para esse período e
given the
também
calendar of
pelo
some
menor
unexpected expenses for the
ganhos,
period and given the slower
pontualmente
pace of
não tivemos
sales,
alavancagem operacional.
we did not have operational
Isso não
leverage.
altera a trajetória de
This does
diluição
not
anual que
change the
iniciamos em
annual dilution
2024 e
trajectory
com a
that we
qual
began in 2024
comprometemos a seguir de
and
forma
which we are
consistente em
committed to
2025 e nos
consistently
próximos
follow in
anos.
2025 and in the
Lembrando
years to
que
come.
dentro do
It is
ciclo
worth
em que a
noting that
companhia se
in
encontra,
this cycle where the
nossas
company finds
despesas,
itself now,
investimentos, tanto CAPEX
our
quanto
CapEx
OPEX,
and
não
OpEx
são
expenses
investimentos
are no
estrutural.
longer investments of a
As
structural
as
nature.
perspectivas que temos de maiores
The
volumes de
prospect of
negócios
higher
e
sales
ganhos de
volumes
eficiência
and
são frutos dos
efficiency gains
investimentos
is the
realizados nos
result
últimos
of
anos.
investments made in
A
recent
partir de
years.
agora, começamos a ter oportunidades também
Now we
em
start having some
redução de algumas
opportunities as well
despesas
to
e
reduce
já
some
iniciamos o trabalho
expenses,
dedicado
and we
para
have already
alcançá-los.
begun work aimed at capturing
A
these
Realize
opportunities.
seguiu sua evolução e
Realize
contribuição
continued
nos
its
varejos,
evolution
atuando
and
como uma alavanca
contributing
de
to the
fidelização dos
retail
nossos clientes,
operation, acting as a
suportada
lever
por uma
for
queda,
customer loyalty,
por uma carteira
supported
saudável,
by a
uma queda
healthy
na
portfolio
inadimplência e
and
crescimento de
reduced
37% no
delinquency,
resultado.
posting a
Nosso
37% growth
lucro
in its
líquido
results.
consolidado
Our
foi de
consolidated net income
274
was
milhões, um
279
aumento de
million
9% em
BRL,
relação
an
ao
increase of
anterior
9% over the
e quase
previous year, and
16% no
up
lucro por ação.
almost up 16% in
Tivemos
earnings per
também uma
share.
geração de 473
We generated
milhões de
473
caixa
million in free cash flow.
Esses resultados proporcionaram
These
ROIC
results
de
provided an
14,9%
ROIC of
nos últimos 12
14.4%
meses,
in the last 12
aumento de
months, an
1,7
increase
ponto
of
percentual.
1.7 percentage point.
Os nossos canais
Our
digitais já
digital
representam
channels already account
17%
for
das vendas.
17%
Seu
of
crescimento
sales,
a partir de
and
agora também é uma alavanca de rentabilidade da
their
companhia.
growth can drive the company's
Agora nós contamos com
profitability.
as operações on e
We
off
now have
totalmente
fully
integradas no centro de São
integrated
Paulo.
online and
Com isso,
offline
nós
operations
ganhamos
at
um
the
maior
DC
crescimento
in São Paulo.
disponível e
With that,
velocidade
we
na
gained a wider
disponibilização
assortment
dos
of
itens em
products and
estoque,
faster
o que
availability of
proporciona um
items in
feedback
e-commerce,
instantâneo sobre
which
a performance
provides
dos
us with
produtos,
instant
tomadas de
feedback
decisão de
on
forma
product
mais ágil,
performance, more
redução de
agile
rupturas e
decision-making,
melhoria no nível de
reduced
serviço.
stockouts, and
A
improved
participação do
levels
estoque
of
novo
service.
nas vendas dos
The share
canais
of new
digitais
inventory in the
aumentou
sales
8
that
pontos
take place
percentuais
over
nos
this
dados de
channel
9 meses,
increased
o
by
que
8
também
percentage points
contribuiu
in the
para uma
first
melhor
9
margem.
months, which also contributed to a
Nós
better
avançamos em
gross margin.
tecnologia e na jornada cada vez mais fluida em
We have
lojas,
made progress in
além de
technology and
seguir com
in
as planos de
creating an
expansão para cidades
increasingly
novas.
fluid shopping experience in the
Nesse ano,
stores,
nós
in
já
addition to
inauguramos
continuing
até
with our
aqui
expansion plan for new
18 novas
cities.
lojas,
So far this year, we have
suprindo a nossa
opened
expectativa de
18 new
abertura,
stores, and we
que
will
é
meet
entre
our
30 e
expectation of
37
openings
novas
between
unidades no
30
total
and
do ano, incluindo
37
todas as
units
nossas
in
marcas.
total for the year, including all of
O
our
nosso plano de
brands.
expansão está focado em
Our
praças
expansion
ainda não
plan is
atendidas.
focused on markets
E
that are not yet served.
esse formato de loja é beneficiado pelo abastecimento
And
por
this
SKUs.
store profile is
Outro ponto que
benefiting
nos deixa
from
confiantes
SKU
é que nossos
fulfillment model.
novos modelos de loja
Another point
em
that makes
todas
us
as unidades
confident
de
is that
negócio
our new
estão
store models
performando
in all business units
comprovadamente
are
acima da
proven
média.
to be performing
E a
above
remodelação de
average.
unidades
And the
também é um dos
remodeling of
focos
units
dos
is
nossos
also a
investimentos.
focus of our investments.
A evolução da jornada Omni,
The evolution of
aliada à
the
expansão de novas
omnichannel
lojas
journey,
e a
combined with the
remodelação das
expansion of
existentes,
new stores and
são alavancas
remodeling of
importantes na
existing
nossa
ones,
geração de
are
valor
important
e
levers
acionistas.
for value creation for customers
Essas
and
iniciativas
shareholders.
têm tornado nossa
These
companhia mais
initiatives have
integrada e
made our company
flexível
more
para atender
integrated
às
and
novas
flexible
demandas do
to meet
consumidor
new
em
consumer
diferentes
demands
cenários
and different
macroeconômicos.
macroeconomic scenarios.
Nossa posição de caixa líquido
This,
de 1,3
our
bi,
net cash
aliada à
position of
consistente
1.3
geração
billion BRL combined
operacional
with
de
consistent
caixa líquido,
operational
nos
generation
dá
of free cash
tranquilidade
flow
para operar
gives
em
us peace
cenários
of mind to
adversos e
operate in
flexibilidade
adverse
para seguir os
scenarios,
investimentos
and
estratégicos
flexibility
em
to
cenários
continue
em que o
with
cenário não
strategic
funcione,
investments
ao
aimed
mesmo
at
tempo
driving our
que
growth,
distribuímos valor aos
while we
acionistas.
also create value for our
Mesmo com o
shareholders.
terceiro trimestre pontualmente mais
Even with
desafiador,
a third quarter that
o
was
desempenho
more
acumulado dos
challenging,
últimos 9 meses
the
nos dá
accumulated
confiança no
performance of the
caminho que
last 9
escolhemos.
months gives us confidence in the
Ainda
path
nem
that we
chegamos na
chose.
metade da jornada de captura dos
We are
benefícios.
not yet
Nossa
halfway through
prioridade é
capturing the
acelerar os ganhos
benefits.
para atingir o
Our
potencial
priority is to
total do modelo.
accelerate gains to achieve the potential,
Agradeço novamente a presença
the
de
full
todos aqui
potential of the
e passo
model.
agora a
I would
palavra
like
ao
to
Daniel.
thank all of you for your confidence, and I hand the
Bom
floor
dia a
over to
todos.
Daniel. Thank you,
Nesse
Fabio.
terceiro
Good morning,
trimestre,
everyone.
atingimos
In Q3,
4,2% de
retail
crescimento
revenue
na
grew
receita de varejo,
4.2%
4,7%
and
no varejo,
4.7%
com
in
as vendas
apparel, with sales impacted by atypical temperature dynamics, as Fabio already mentioned. However, when we look at Q2 and Q3 combined, apparel grew 12.5% year-on-year, and it is worth remembering that we had a strong basis for comparison in Q3 2024. Despite the negative volume, we saw an improvement in the conversion rate in our stores. Price adjustments to pass on inflation and a greater share of new items in the mix also contributed positively to sales. We will continue to carefully balance prices by monitoring the market and product performance, focusing on the positioning of our brands and customer perception. For the fourth quarter, we expect price adjustments close to inflation. Our digital channel posted 4% growth with a penetration of approximately 17% and achieved SG&A in Q3 similar to that of the physical store operation. We reached a new record number of active customers on our app, and our app and website were the most visited among national fashion players, further consolidating our leadership among omni players in the sector. As for Q4, we will have a slightly easier basis of comparison in preparing for Black Friday and especially Christmas. As regards the gross margin, we continue to advance even with inflated costs and high interest rates. We ended Q3 with a retail gross margin of 51.1%. Apparel gross margin of 56.2%, also 0.5 percentage point higher. This performance was made possible by efficient inventory management. And here, I highlight the reduction of old items older than 16 weeks, coupled with agility and flexibility in our fulfillment and fashion execution. Price adjustments in line with inflation and an improved mix of assortment and inventory age also contributed to the third quarter. These factors give us confidence that the gross margin for the fourth quarter will be slightly positive compared to 2024. As for expenses, operating expenses grew 7% above revenue performance. This was a one-off event, and selling expenses increased their share by 0.9 percentage point due to lower sales volumes and also to the following factors: increase in personnel expenses resulting from improvements in employee benefits, the transition of the voucher payment model, which led to a one-off increase in expenses. This initiative is important for appreciation and engagement of our teams in line with industry practices. It has brought a positive impact on team retention. And with that, the headquarters of sales was higher than expected, but by October, the headcount had already been resized. This combined non-recurring effect was approximately 7 million BRL in the quarter and impacted sales expenses growth by 1 percentage point. The other factor was higher occupancy expenses. Part of the new contracts and lease renewals were negotiated on a CTO model, or total cost of occupancy, which is considered more economically advantageous for the company. With this change, rent, condominium fees, and promotion funds are grouped together, forming the CTO, which is accounted for as occupancy expenses, SG&A post-IFRS, and not as leasing, amortization, and financial charges. This impacted the growth of selling expenses by 0.9 percentage point. However, it had a neutral effect on the company's net income. These one-off effects impacted the leverage for the period by 0.6 percentage point. General and administrative expenses increased by 4.5%, reflecting inflation in the period and higher expenses with personnel benefits, partially offset by lower expenses with restricted stock. Lastly, expenses related to the employee profit sharing program impacted net revenue by 0.2 percentage point. The comparison with the previous year, both for the quarter and the year to date, was compromised given the non-linear performance dynamics in 2024. Provisioning for the profit sharing program, or PPR, is based on the accumulated annual results and annual budget, rather than based on the achievement of specific targets for a single quarter. In the year to date, total EBITDA and net income grew 27%. As mentioned, the PPR over net income for the year should represent around 9% to 13%. We stress our ambition to improve operational leverage in Q4 and in the years to come. We are confident that investments made will allow us to achieve sales growth that exceeds expenses. And as already mentioned, we have begun working to reduce expenses. Realize delivered another quarter with significant improvements. The result of 79.8 million BRL reflected the continuous improvement in the credit profile of the portfolio. Our robust and accurate credit granting model, combined with a healthy portfolio, positions Realize appropriately for the current credit cycle in Brazil. Our over 90 Stage 3 ex-regulation closed at 14.7%, 1.3 percentage point lower than the previous year, and our short-term delinquency remains at low levels. As long as the macroeconomic environment remains uncertain, we will continue to offer credit cautiously, focused on less risky profiles, mainly through our private label, ensuring support for retail sales and maintaining the quality of the portfolio. The net effect of Resolution 4966 was insignificant in the quarter, as we had already indicated in the second quarter earnings call, and this dynamic is likely to continue in Q4. For Q4, we expect Realize to continue its positive performance trajectory, albeit to a lesser extent than in previous periods, due to the stronger basis for comparison, given the sequential evolution throughout 2024. Total EBITDA grew 3%, with EBITDA margin of 19.3%, down by 0.2 percentage point, and reflects the challenge in retail operations, partially offset by better results from financial services. Net income increased by 9.4% and also reflects a lower effective tax rate and lower financial results. Earnings per share grew by 15.5%, benefiting from the execution of 85% of the share buyback plan. I would like to highlight that this year we have already distributed 1.4 billion in the form of interest on capital and our share buyback program. As for ROIC, the 12-month accumulated ROIC increased by 1.7 percentage points, reaching 14.4%. Thank you very much. I now turn the floor to Fabi.
Vamos iniciar nossa sessão de Q&A.
We will now begin the Q&A session. To ask questions, please click on the raise hand icon. In order to optimize time and give more attendees a chance to participate, we kindly request that each analyst only ask one question at a time, and if necessary, return to the queue for additional questions. First question is from Luiz Guanais with BTG. Guanais, go ahead. Good morning, Fabi, Fábio, and Daniel. I would like to understand the space you see for price increase and ticket increase, and whether we should expect markdowns over the coming quarters. Fábio, you mentioned this Q3 dynamics where markdowns were smaller, also related to the temperature. What should we expect looking forward? And the second question, given the company's cash generation, which continues to be strong, and the company's capital structure, how should we think about payout in the future, particularly with this discussion of a possible taxation on dividends in Brazil? Thank you for the question, Guanais. I would say that when we look at opportunities to increase price and ticket, a part of that is replenishing the price according to inflation, and this has been viable. I think that our prices remain very competitive, and I think that there's still room for that. The competition is working in the same way, and this has been very well accepted and received by consumers because average inflation rate for the sector has been in line or slightly lower than the general inflation rate. When we look at some opportunities to increase ticket by assortment, we've seen that. I think that every now and then we have explored that. There's an opportunity to explore more opportunities to increase the ticket by product assortment. Also related to that, regarding markdowns, we had a lower level of markdowns over the year with a very effective inventory management. In the third quarter, we even missed some sales opportunities. We could have sold 2 to 3 percentage points more. But on the other hand, we were able to have a higher gross margin. But that led us to a renewed, streamlined inventory for the coming cycles. So I would say that both the gain in ticket and margin with a lower related to a lower level of markdowns continues, and it continues to be an important point. As regards the payout, I think you've seen that the company has had an opportunity to grow with significant investments and with relevant payouts. Either the distribution of interest on capital, interest on equity, or share buyback, which has increased the earnings per share for our shareholders. And I think that we have the right conditions, given our robust cash generation, to continue to grow, to invest, and to continue to have a good level of payout. Daniel can add to that. As regards the taxation on dividends, there are 2 points here. First, we have to wait for the final decision regarding taxation on dividends. This will still be defined. We are evaluating what could possibly change in the dividend distribution this year, considering this possible taxation. But it's something that we haven't come to a conclusion about that. Once we have a definitive response, we'll get back to you. But I stress what Fábio mentioned. This year, we have distributed 1.4, either through share buyback or interest on equity. So the company continues to strongly distribute its results to our shareholders, and our commitment is that we will continue to do so in the coming periods. Excellent. Thank you very much, Daniel and Fábio. Thank you, Guanais. Next question from Bob Ford with Bank of America.
Good
morning. Thank you for taking my question. How should we see the benefits of CTO? Rentals are more variable than fixed in the stores, and Realize was a pleasant surprise. How should we expect the cost of risk for Realize? Regarding CTO, well, Bob, this is a more one-off effect in this quarter, perhaps in this year, because what we had was some contracts were negotiated in the CTO format. And when we have the CTO model, it's more advantageous in terms of negotiation. However, instead of being considered amortization and interest, it is recorded as an operating expense. So this is something that kind of gets in the way of the comparison. I should tell you that we are actually assessing whether in the future, ideally, we should start bringing you information in the pre-IFRS model, which would allow for a clearer financial assessment. But this is a decision that once made, we will share with you. But this was kind of one-off. And as we feel that this generated an impact, we will explain more on that. And your second question was regarding Realize. What I can tell you is that this evolution we saw in Realize so far is the result of all the adjustments we made in terms of credit granting, the adjustment made regarding our credit granting models, which have been shown to be effective. So we are able to offer credit with lower risk. And with that, we had an effective improvement in the positioning of our portfolio. What we believe is that Realize still has a potential and its role to drive the retail operation. And as we have a more appropriate credit moment, I think that we will be able to evolve more positively in our credit granting, so that we'll be able to work either to expand the customer base or to foster an even greater ticket increase and greater shopping frequency, which is the big target of Realize, to foster retail sales. Super clear. Thank you very much.
A próxima pergunta vem
Next
do
question
Vinícius.
from Vinicius Strano with UBS.
Bom dia, Fabi. Bom dia, Fábio,
Good
Daniel.
morning, Fabi, Fabio,
Duas
Daniel.
perguntas aqui do meu
I have
lado.
two
Primeiro, eu queria
questions.
explorar um pouco mais
First,
as
I'd
despesas.
like to explore
Nesse
expenses a
TRI, né, teve
little more.
pouco de
This
despesa
quarter,
duplicada, ainda tem a
there
questão do
was a
CTO.
duplicate expense and
Mas
also
eu queria explorar com vocês
CTO.
onde que vocês
So
enxergam
I'd like to hear from you,
oportunidade de ganho
where
de
do you see
eficiência de maneira
opportunities to
geral.
have
Acho que eu ouvi
efficiency
por parte
gains
o
overall?
Daniel comentou sobre um trabalho de
I
redução
think
de
that Daniel
despesas.
talked about
Eu queria,
work to
se pudesse
reduce
elaborar um
expenses
pouquinho
during the
mais sobre
presentation.
isso.
So perhaps you could give us more color on
E minha
that.
segunda pergunta,
And my
mais
second
pro lado da
question,
venda,
more
vocês
regarding
falam do impacto
sales.
de 2
You
a 3
spoke about the
pontos,
impact
né,
of 2 to
por
3
essa
percentage
questão
points
climática.
given the climate.
Então, se vocês puderem só explorar um pouquinho mais como é que é esse
So
gap de
could you
performance entre as lojas mais
explain
quentes,
how
em
this
lojas em regiões mais
this
frias,
performance
e
gap
como é que está sendo a
happened in colder
receptividade
or warmer
das coleções
stores,
de verão,
and
onde a gente
how
tem
how well received were
uma
the summer
temperatura um pouco mais
collections?
quente. Obrigado.
Because that's when we have warm
Obrigado,
temperatures.
Vinícius. Diria, acho que
Thank you,
sobre a
Vinicius.
questão das despesas,
Regarding
o
expenses,
Daniel citou ali, acho que tem no material, né? A
Danielle
gente teve
mentioned, and
algumas
it's in our
necessidades
release, that we
pontuais,
had
né?
some
Não sei se o
one-off
Bruno já
duplications
explicou
and
sobre
also the
isso,
CTO,
mas
as
as
we
oportunidades,
explained.
né, que eu acho que está na tua pergunta,
But I think that your
elas
question is
vêm
more about
em dois aspectos,
opportunities,
né? A
and
gente sempre falou
opportunities
muito que a gente
happen in
tinha
two
uma
aspects.
oportunidade
We
de
always
crescer
say
mais
that we have an
rápido,
opportunity
fazendo
to
as
grow
investimentos, né?
sales more than
Os
expenses
investimentos que a
through
gente tem
dilution,
passado.
and that
Mas esses
results
mesmos
from investments
investimentos,
made in the
eles
past.
também
But these
vêm
same
de
investments
produtividade.
allow for
E
efficiency
como a gente
gains
já
and
tem falado há
productivity
muito tempo, a
gains.
gente tem uma curva de
And we've
aprendizado
said this for a while.
que
There's a
traz
learning
produtividade,
curve
né?
involved.
Produtividade
And this
nas
brings us
fábricas, nas
opportunity
lojas,
to have
como serviço,
productivity
né? Mas
gains
além
at the
disso,
stores
né,
or
além
at
de tudo, a gente tem
at
muito
the DC.
investimento em tecnologia,
And
inteligência
in addition to
artificial,
that, we have a lot of
mais
investments in
conhecimento.
technology,
E além de tudo
AI,
isso,
more
já
knowledge.
identificamos
And we have seen and we
oportunidades
have
além
identified
dessas, tanto no
opportunities that
operacional quanto
go
no
beyond
administrativo, que a
beyond
partir
these,
de
both
agora
at
a
the
gente
operational and the
começa a trabalhar para
administrative
acelerar, capturar
levels.
isso.
And from now, we'll start working to capture those
Com relação
opportunities.
à venda,
And your
acho
question
que
also
diria que
touched
sim,
on
né? Quando a gente falou
sales.
do gap de
When we
performance, né,
spoke
que a
about
gente
the
estima que poderia
performance
ter
gap,
sido 2 ou
that we
3
estimate we could have
pontos a
sold 2
mais,
to 3 percentage
eu não
points more,
relacionaria só a
I
clima,
would not
porque
relate that only to the
um
climate.
pouco ali a gente teve uma decisão nossa, porque a gente tem
It
a
was a
habilidade de
decision we made
responder um
because
pouco
we
a
have
isso,
this
né? Uma
ability to
atuação flexível.
respond to the
E a
climate.
gente
We
tem
have
a
a very
capacidade de ir
flexible model
evoluindo ao longo
that
da
that
coleção.
gives us
Na
speed
verdade,
to
a gente
adapt
tomou
during the
uma
collection.
decisão ali
And what happened was
para
we
evitar
made
uma
a
sobra de
decision
estoque,
to avoid
que
overstock.
com o prolongamento das temperaturas frias,
And with the
a
longer
gente perdeu
duration
mais
of
vendas do
cold
que a gente
temperatures, we
imaginava. Mas
lost more
oportunidades,
sales than we
né? Eu
imagined
diria que assim,
in
se
terms
a
of sales
performance do
opportunities.
ano ela está
So
num bom
if
patamar,
the
se
performance of
for
the
abaixo do
year
que a gente
is good,
poderia, né, for
Q3
abaixo do nosso
performance
potencial,
was
for abaixo da
below
nossa
our potential
expectativa,
and below
que ela
our
poderia ter sido 2 a
expectation.
3 pontos
It could
percentuais,
have been
estava na
2 to
nossa
3
mão, né?
percentage points
Depende do
higher.
clima. A
And
gente pode fazer melhor.
and it depended on our
Mas fica aí
decision. We
também,
could have
isso
done
já
better.
mostrou
And that's
que a
why we
gente
mentioned
toma
that we have
decisão,
adjusted some
né, para a gente
decision-making
ter,
windows
principalmente nesse período
so
de
that,
inverno, que
especially
é
in
um
the
período né,
autumn-winter
mais
period,
crítico,
which is a
a gente
narrower
pudesse
window,
performar melhor em
we
algumas
could
situações,
perform
né?
better
Quanto à relação
in
ali da
other
performance por
situations.
praças, a gente
And as
costuma abrir
performance
o
per
número, né, para a gente
location, we
poder
normally
dizer
don't
as
disclose this
performances
number. But
das
what I can
praças
tell you
mais
is
quentes.
that
Ela
in
vem sendo
warmer
superior
regions,
às praças em
performance
frio,
is much superior
por mais
than the
tempo. Isso
performance in
mostra
those
que
regions
a nossa
where
coleção está sendo bem
cold
aceita
temperatures
pelas
remain for
praças.
longer. And this shows that
A
our
questão
collection is
mais
being well
marcada por praça,
received.
ela tende a perder um pouco o efeito, né, daqui
And
para
this
frente,
tends
né?
to lose more
Lembrando
effect
que
looking forward.
quando a gente fala de quarto
As a
tri,
reminder, when we speak about
80% do
Q4,
faturamento do quarto tri ele está
80%
concentrado ali nos
of
períodos de
sales
novembro e
in
dezembro,
Q4 are
especialmente Black
concentrated in
Friday,
November
Natal,
and December,
festa de final de ano.
mainly Black Friday, Christmas, and the holiday season.
Obrigado, Fábio.
Thank you, Fabio.
Obrigado, Vinícius.
Thank you, Vinicius.
A próxima pergunta
Next
vem da
question from Danny Iger with XP.
Bom dia, pessoal. Obrigada por
Good
pegar minha
morning,
pergunta.
everyone. Thank you for
Eu
taking
tenho
my
quase
question.
follow-up, mas
I have
nesse
kind of a
comentário
follow-up
falando
question
sobre
based on your comment,
vocês terem
Fabio,
a habilidade, né,
of you having the ability
lidar com esses adversos de
to
clima, mas
cope
aí
with
adiante a gente tem que
climate
citar a decisão aí,
adversities,
enfim, que vocês
and the
tomaram
fact that
que
you
acabou
made a decision
sendo, né, errada no
that
caso,
ended
que
up
vocês
being
deixaram
the
essa
wrong
essa venda vazia.
decision
Mas aí
because you
entendendo assim,
lost
olhando para
sales.
frente, né? A gente
But
olhando,
to
acho que a
understand the
previsão do tempo
future,
sempre pode mudar, mas a gente
of
ainda vê
course, weather
um
forecasts can
clima
always
adverso,
change,
pelo
but we
menos
still
até
expect
novembro, né? Até com
adverse
mais chuva,
climate
enfim.
conditions conditions until December with more rain. But not just thinking about Q4, But next year, we'll never know whether winter will happen at the right time, at the usual time, if we can say that. So I'd like to understand when we are going to start seeing these results of this more agile model, because we still see this missing. I think that what you said makes a lot of sense, but the fact that you can react quickly, well, we had a lot of months with cold weather, and perhaps could have made a different decision, or perhaps take more risk regarding inventory. Perhaps you were too conservative. So could you help us understand how the strategy will be to try to have a story that is less dependent on the climate? It seems that the macroeconomic scenario is not an issue, but in a more challenging macroeconomic scenario, it would be good to know. And speaking about expenses, Daniel spoke about the efficiency package. I'd like to understand how much you can reduce expenses. Look into expenses as a percentage of sales and comparing with your peers. It is quite robust. So, in terms of agility and becoming lighter, what kind of adjustment can you make in addition to avoid the duplications? It would be good to have this kind of visibility, given the uncertainty regarding future growth. So perhaps prepare the company for more challenging situations, regardless of other factors. Thank you. Oh, thank you for the questions, Danny. I think that you're correct. What in my answer in the previous question regarding the climate, we don't control the climate, but we control the decisions we make. So we have the tool, we have tools, we have ways to produce quickly and to regulate inventory according to demand and the climate. And every day that goes by, we evolve in that regard. I think that yes, you're correct, we were conservative. You're right, we were more conservative. That led to some sales opportunities being lost. We estimate at 2 to 3 percentage points. But still, if we look at the collection as a whole, Q2 plus Q3, we posted growth in Q2 plus Q3 of 11.5% in total sales. I haven't seen any other player growing more than that, combining the two quarters. So I think that your point is that it could have been better. We missed an opportunity in Q3, but if we were less conservative, we would have done even better. So perhaps the third quarter was slightly below some others, but if you sum the two, put the two together, we were still very positive. There is an opportunity for us to do even better, and it's a decision, not the model. The model can respond to that. The model is ready. We discussed this a lot in-house. We narrowed windows to assess and make decision to be able to use the model even better, because we have the model, and we expect to have a better performance regardless of any climate variation or macroeconomic scenario. When did you change this window, Fabio? Just so we can understand when we are going to see this kind of effective result. In the end of the season, in the end of winter. That's when we improved our processes. And as regards expenses, and you're also right, we have an expense base that we consider to be high. And that's why, in addition to dilution of expenses, we see opportunities to cut down expenses. And Daniel can speak more about that. Well, Danny, in the case of expenses, first, let me stress our commitment of diluting expenses over time. So we acknowledge, we knew that we have a level of expense that, regardless of the comparison with other players, is higher than the level we operated in the past. It is our goal to sequentially reduce expenses. What we observe is that in addition to the ability to grow sales above expenses, which was not the case in the third quarter for the reasons we mentioned, we have the diagnostics of that. There are some specific areas where we can indeed reduce expenses. We have not sized that. So it's not something we can share with you yet in detail, but what we want to stress is that yes, there are opportunity for efficiency gains, and we will be pursuing pursuing those opportunities. This is not a program that will come in the fourth quarter. It's not a quarter work. It's something that will happen over the fourth quarter and over 2026.
Excelente, obrigada.
Excellent, thank you. Thank you, Danny. Next question from Joseph with JP Morgan.
Acho que sou eu. Irma
Actually, it's Irma from Goldman Sachs. Well, you've enabled my mic, so I'll ask the question. Thank you. Going back to Danny's question about the moment, I would like to approach that from a different angle to understand if you're thinking about possible adjustments in building the collections and assortment to maintain greater flexibility to meet climate requirements, given all the improvements you've made in logistics and agility of processes, so that you could match the climate that is becoming less and less predictable. My second question is a follow-up to Guanai's question in terms of capital allocation. Whether potential acquisitions are still an opportunity or a possibility, and perhaps you would want to keep greater flexibility in the capital structure looking forward, or is this water behind the bridge and you're going to focus on organic growth? Thank you. Thank you for the questions, Irma. I think that as regards collection adjustments, as you yourself mentioned, that's part of the business. One part of it is having a model that is prepared to make adjustments in quantities and production, and we are prepared for that. We evolved in our decision-making. Another point is assortment, and we mentioned that the performance of more perennial items that are not so seasonal was much superior than the other products. So we have been giving more space for these items. These items are becoming more and more important. They are responding well in different situations. So that was the most difficult part of the model, to have the model, actually, and we now have it. Now we have to improve decision-making points. And regarding assortment, we have more room for those items that make up the wardrobe. We can have response for winter time with more layers of apparel. We have been doing this in apparel, and more we are prepared to better respond to climate variations. As for potential acquisitions, we have not worked on anything inorganic. We have a lot of organic growth to come from our investments. Our capital structure, as I mentioned, allows us to continue to make these investments in an environment which is still very uncertain and risky. So we prefer to have a more conservative structure at this point, to have flexibility in the way in which we invest, in the way in which we operate, and at the same time distributing value to our shareholders. Daniel, do you want to add? What you talked about, flexibility, is a key topic, particularly at this moment, and in a country, in an economic situation where we know there are always many challenges. It is clear, thank you.
Agora sim, Joseph, JP
Now,
Morgan.
next question from Joseph Giordano with JP Morgan.
Olá, bom dia a todos. Bom dia, Fábio, Daniel.
Hello, good morning, Fábio, Daniel. Fabi, welcome, Fabi.
Minha pergunta são dois pontos
I have two points.
O primeiro dele olhando pouquinho
The first,
para a questão de ajuste de sortimento, né, e
looking
reatividade.
at assortment adjustment,
Como é que vocês têm visto
I'd like to
a
understand
evolução do
how
mercado?
you see the evolution of lead time,
O produto tá na gôndola,
decision,
por
the
agora,
moment
lead
that
time
the
pode mudar
decision is
bastante
made to the product
pra
being on the
cadeia,
shelves.
do inverno. Talvez,
So I want to understand the lead time. Perhaps in winter time, this
e olhando
time is more elastic.
essa alocação de capital,
And looking at capital allocation,
dividendo, que foi bastante
we have
explorado até
dividends.
agora,
We've talked about that already.
aceleração de expansão e reforma.
And
Então,
accelerating
mais
expansions and remodeling.
visibilidade, como você
Could you give us
mencionou,
more visibility in terms of what you see the potential to accelerate,
na Yukon e na Renner,
particularly at Renner and
vocês têm visto
Yukon,
a
and
performance
how you see the
dessa reforma
performance of these refurbishments that you have been carrying out at the stores? Thank you. Thank you for the questions, Joseph. Regarding assortment, reactivity, and decision points, I think that our lead time has been improving more and more. I would say that in winter time, lead time is always a little longer on average, depending on the type of product, but compared to spring and summer. And we have to consider that autumn was normal. We had an expectation to have a normal winter time, but winter was longer. Retrospectively, we should have made the decision to have a greater production. We could have done that even with an average lead time that is slightly longer than summer spring. So now we are working on the decision points and also to shorten the winter lead times as well, to make our responsiveness and flexibility even greater. From the standpoint of capital allocation and store openings and store remodeling, I'll speak about the opening of stores, and then I will speak about capital allocation and investments. But we are quite pleased, both with the new stores and with the new store models. The new stores have been performing well. In a cohort that has been performing superiorly compared to the previous cohorts, and Renner, that is opening stores in new cities with formats on average slightly smaller than the current average, while we have to be accurate in fulfillment by SKU that allows us to have differentiated assortments per store. Well, all of the stores benefit from that, but this store format is the one that is benefiting the most. So in the future, well, looking forward, the performance of these new stores will become even more important. They are performing above average, and we can expect that they will do even better. Regarding remodeling and refurbishment, it is important to say that we have new store models in all of our formats, Renner, Camicado, and Youcom. For Renner, for example, if you're in São Paulo and if you want to visit the Morumbi store, which is our most modern one, well, in Camicado, we have the most updated models in Galeria Mall in Campinas and in Vitória Mall in Espírito Santo. And soon we'll have more units running on that model. We are refurbishing and remodeling and opening some other stores. And for Youcom, in addition to being a new model, it is a bigger model. We have new stores. The first was in the beginning of the year in Barigui, in the city of Curitiba. But recently we reopened a refurbished store at Anália Franco Mall in São Paulo that doubled the size of the store with a new layout, a new model, bigger selling space with high sales per square meter. I mean, that is investment that makes us very pleased and confident. For Renner, I mentioned the Morumbi store, which is the most up-to-date store, but it is important to highlight that we've been testing this new model for over 2 years. We have a number of new stores with this new model, and we have been improving it, actually, and it has been performing better and better. This is proven. We have a large number of stores running with this model, and we have made decisions. We have decisions to make in each one of them. One important point is that we've been able to renovate the stores at a cost that is 30% lower than last year because we've had these tests and because we understand what really matters more, the refurbishments in Renner and Camicado. So we invest less per square meter, and we have a performance of the stores that is better, and both things are very important to us. And Joey, as Fabio mentioned, we have models that have been tested and work. So in terms of capital allocation, investing in expansion and trying to accelerate expansion, both of Renner and Youcom, is a priority. And then capital allocation for refurbishment and renovations and remodeling. These are the two big pillars of investments for the next 2 to 3 years.
Nossa próxima pergunta vem
Next
do
question
Ruben.
from Ruben Couto with Santander.
Bom dia, pessoal. Obrigado pelo espaço.
Good morning.
Eu queria voltar pouco
I would like to go back to the topic of sales growth. If you could speak about growth of digital GMV, which has seen a good acceleration this quarter. I understand that there is a base effect, but the gap of what online was growing more than brick-and-mortar stores was kind of closed in this quarter. Anything specific about this channel? The marketplace platform being very aggressive, has this affected you in any way? And what can we expect for Q4, including Black Friday? Thank you, Ruben. Here's what I can say. We have a share of digital sales which is quite high, 17%. And what we see is that there has been greater commercial aggressiveness in digital costs. I think that some players are trying to grow more. Even the marketplaces are competing more, and we chose to be not that aggressive in inorganic traffic, and that's why growth was not that relevant. It's a balance that we have for growth versus profitability. And I think that we can balance this equation quite well. We can grow the trend we see looking forward. And of course, this will depend on the quarter, but on average, we expect to see greater growth in digital sales than brick-and-mortar sales, but with profitability. This is what we are pursuing. We had slightly more timid growth in the quarter. This is one-off, and it is a reflection, I should say, of a reality that last year we had more surplus of inventory, and the digital channel has this characteristic of being able to sell these down products. And this year, as we mentioned, we missed some sales opportunity and we didn't have any leftover of inventory, any surplus inventory. So in the digital channel, we didn't have a significant marked down volume this year as we had last year. It's super clear. Thank you, Fabio. Next question from Rodrigo Gastim with Itaú. Good morning, Fabio, Daniel. I have 2 points. Fabio, please tell us more about this evolution of the quarter. You mentioned a little bit the climate, and we heard a lot of industry feedback of a very hard September. I think it was the worst month of the quarter. Can you tell us about the evolution over the quarter? And now we have the whole of October already closed. Have you perceived any improvement regarding the climate, or is October following the same pace of the third quarter? And second point, Daniel, about the phasing of retail expenses. My question is, to what extent this was really one-off, and to what extent this depended on an expectation of revenue that fell below expectation? In other words, when you look at Q4 and the setup of expenses you have for Q4 expenses, do you feel comfortable at this level that we will continue to see a dilution? How should we think about this in Q4? These are my 2 points. Thank you, Gastim. We normally don't speak about monthly results or results month by month, but what I have heard in the market, in different industries, what I hear is that there was a strong slowdown in September. But to us, we did not have an impact concentrated on just one single month. I think it was all kind of distributed over the quarter. Again, we could have sold more, and Daniel will answer the part on expenses, but sales growing more than expenses would help us with that, and we have an opportunity to post even greater growth. So I would say that we had some better months, some worse months, but not the same impact that you heard in other industries, in other sectors that I have heard about as well. And as for Q4, we don't envision any dramatic change up or down. What really matters for Q4 is that 80% of it has not happened yet. So it's kind of difficult to affirm, but we have a good expectation for the fourth quarter. We are well prepared with new inventories, with a good campaign, excellent products that are being well received. with a better performance in those regions where we have a more normalized effect. So I think it is way too early to say, but I think that we have a positive expectation for Q4. Let's see how it is going to play out. Talking about expenses, Daniel, over to you. Well, speaking about expenses, Gastim, since the beginning, we said that Q3 had two challenges. One was growth. We knew that we would post lower growth. And secondly, some expenses that we knew about related to the calendar. Well, sales came below our potential, below the expectation, as Fabio mentioned. And as for expenses on the expense side, we had some one-off events that made expenses be slightly above what we had originally designed. So this is kind of the story for the third quarter. Now, that was explained. As for the fourth quarter, if we look at the pace of expense growth, Q4 will be the quarter with the lowest expense growth in the year. We believe that with a lower pace of expense increase, we will resume expenses dilution, which is our goal for the year. We've already had an expense dilution year to date, and Q4 will contribute to that even more. And the idea is that we will continue to dilute the increase of expenses in the subsequent cycles and periods. Perfect. Very clear. Thank you very much. Thank you, Gastim. Next question from Pedro Pinto with Bradesco. Thank you. Good morning. Thank you for taking my questions. And I'm sorry to go back to a point that has been mentioned by Dani and Irma, but I would like to understand better those initiatives implemented for the coming cycles. Spoke about assortment with Irma, a little bit about the decision-making process in answering Dani's question. So I'd like to understand, how was the diagnostic process related to that? What was wrong in this allocation? I mean, is there any element, any capability that the company still lacks, or small adjustments that have been made? I mean, hypothetically, if Q3 were happening again, could you increase sales with a good margin and end the quarter with a balanced inventory? Because as Dani mentioned, temperatures are unpredictable, and also winter has a longer lead time. So I just wanted to understand a little better about this diagnostic process and whether you have all the capabilities. And if this were to happen again, whether you could have a different outcome and a better balance if all this happened again. So that's my first question. The second question is straightforward and easy in terms of people. The company went through a reorganization of the structures and BUs, and Fabi was leading the Renner BU. And we didn't know who would lead the other brands. Have you defined these positions? Are there any other gaps related to personnel and people? Anything to share with us? I'd like to have an update on that work front. Thank you. Thank you, Pedro. About the first question, I've tried to shine more light on this topic. We have the capabilities. When we talk about decision points and improving the adjustment of processes, that's the most difficult capability, and we have that capability. We don't need any more investments for that. We have to adjust the decision-making points. When we speak about the estimate, that in the third quarter we could have sold 1 to 3 percentage points more, or 2 to 3 percentage points more, it is not imagining if we had a better scenario, but is imagining if we had made the adjustments that we committed to making. What's in our hands? I'm not counting on a better scenario or on a worse scenario, because there are other variations there. But considering the same scenario, operating the capabilities that we have, adjusting processes, and everything we've said so far here, we estimate we could have an impact of 2 to 3 percentage points, all equal conditions of temperature and pressure. As for people, we spoke about the new structure, and we announced here both internally and externally to have everyone on the same page regarding the main changes that we were envisioning So we had the Renner BU, which was the most important one. We had an important efficiency gain. We had a productivity gain in the teams with the new organization. Not just consolidating the Renner BU, but also removing some corporate issues and distributing them among the corporate divisions. This brought us greater dynamism. We announced the rationale for the other BUs because it is what makes sense to us. But I would say that we're not in a hurry to do that. Some time ago, we started looking for a person to fill that position. I haven't chosen yet. There's no urgency in that. We just mentioned that to explain the strategy both internally and externally. The position is still open. You asked about other positions. Well, we always make some adjustments here and there, but most of them are well underway. And even in the restructuring, because you see, sometimes we get asked, you're bringing somebody from the market, and that gets more visibility. But we're actually filling 80% of our positions with internal succession, even Fabi's case, as you mentioned. Fabi Takla from the Renner BU, that was an internal movement. And that triggered many other internal movements, and we've been successful in filling most of the positions with internal movements and also bringing new people to add more knowledge. That's very clear. Thank you very much, Fabio. Thank you. Next question from Andrew Rubin with Morgan Stanley.
Hi, thanks very much for the question. I think most have been answered, but maybe just to get an update on your Argentina business, curious how you saw consumption trends throughout the quarter. And now that we start to look forward post the midterm elections, any view on how you expect that business to evolve and what you would need to see to reignite a store growth opportunity in the country? Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. Vou responder em português porque tem a
tradução. I'll answer in Portuguese since we have interpreting. Andrew was asking about Argentina, and to us, Argentina continues to perform better than in previous years. Since the change in the law to operate in Argentina, we've been able to operate well. Every now and then in Q3, since Argentina is a colder place, it was not the best performance there. We performed better in warmer places, but it is performing better than the average of the cold cities. So Argentina is still posting a good performance. It is a future opportunity for us to expand. And right now we maintain the 4 units in operation. We are not thinking about expanding in Argentina now because we want to understand the geopolitical stability of Argentina. It seems that the country is on a good path. The country seems to be recovering, and we are responding well as well. So it's an important future potential for us. We'll just have to wait and see how things will play out there so that we can invest more or just keep what we are investing currently.
Thank you, Fabio.
Thank you, Andrew.
Nossa última pergunta vem do
Our
João.
last question from João Soares with Citi. Thank you, Fabi, and welcome. I have 2 quick questions, Fabio, to see whether the rationale makes sense. Thinking about the gap of the stores in warmer cities. There's 3-4 percentage points, but it makes sense to think as a performance gap among the stores. In other words, the average of these stores running at 6-7% same-store sales this quarter. And a second quick question. To what extent is the e-commerce margin improving now that you have 17% penetration? What is the EBITDA margin gap now and what it was a year ago so that we can try to understand this efficiency that you're gaining online? Thank you, João. The gap we have in terms of opportunities missed that we understood we could have sold more in Q3, that accounts for 2 to 3 percentage points, not 3 to 4, okay? All right, but I did understand your rationale. In the warmer cities, we don't break down number per region, but we'd say that the performance is significantly higher because we have a higher proportional concentration in cities with a hybrid or colder cities. And that's why we could have sold more, regardless of the temperature. With this temperature, I want to make this clear, with this temperature, we could have sold more. We have the capability to do that. And as for e-commerce margins, we've had gross margin gains both in brick and mortar stores and online stores. We have a decision of where to buy. So what matters to us is the margin of e-commerce and physical stores has increased, and total margin has increased as well. So when we look at the operations, we'll look at sales and cost. And I should say that the online cost today equals the offline cost practically. Of course, it varies month by month, but it's practically the same for online and offline. And we have an expectation that it will be slightly better. So if we understand that digital growth is important, and it is, and it tends to grow slightly more than brick and mortar stores because brick and mortar stores will grow too. That's why it's only marginally higher. It could be better in terms of the final margin, in terms of sales and cost for the full operation. And if that is true, this will be a driver of growth for the company as well. It is super clear, Fabio. Thank you. And may I ask a follow-up question? Do you think you have corrected those issues in the end of Q3? Should we see October normalized, thinking about the gaps? Have the opportunities been captured? Well, I would say that we've touched on the processes. I think that the biggest opportunity for improvement is for autumn-winter, because for spring and summer, the items are less diverse in terms of weight, and the production cycle is much faster as well. And these adjustments have been made. And I would say that they are even more important in autumn-winter, but they're already happening, yes. Excellent. Thank you very much. And sorry to ask a third question. Not a problem. Thank you for the questions.
Com isso, encerramos nossa sessão de Q&A.
With that, we are ending the Q&A session. For the questions we did not have time to answer here, ask the questions to our IR team. I turn the floor to Fabio for the final statements. Well, again, I'd like to thank all of you for joining us, and I would like to invite you to our Investor Day on December 8th. We have sent you a save the date, and in the coming days, we will be sending out the invites with more detail. Thank you very much. Thank you. Have a good rest of the day.